I would also like to introduce you and actually hand it over to Gina Palladini from Tomahawk. She'll be the moderator of today, and I would say probably one of the front runners in the field of regenerative tourism in New Zealand. So Gina, thank you so much for being here, and please do take the floor.
Kia ora. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much to the Waikato Tourism Hub for making this opportunity available to all of us. And thanks everybody for being here. It's a subject that is being talked about a lot, lots of questions around it. So hopefully after today, we all know a little bit more about it, thanks to the amazing keynote speaker. So I have the wonderful privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, and that's Anna Pollock. So I met Anna. So first of all, I had a girl crush on Anna's amazing brain, because Anna's got one of those fantastic abilities to really get you to think, and to think differently and kind of challenge where you're at. And so a conversation with Anna is always fantastic. And so I was following her for a while on LinkedIn and stuff. And then I went to a PATA event in Samoa, and I'm like, yes, it's small. We're in Samoa. I'm going to be able to meet Anna. And so I remember when I first saw her, she was just about to do this. You don't know I'm telling this story. She was just about to do her presentation, and I like swooped in. So anybody that knows me, I like take no prisoners. If I'm interested in something, I really go after it. So I like swoop in and I like introduce myself, and Anna was being really great, and we're talking back and forth. And she all of a sudden looked at me and she goes, you know, I'm really enjoying meeting you and talking to you. I need to go do a presentation in 2 minutes. Can this wait, please? So it's really funny. That kicked off our friendship and our relationship. And I've had the pleasure for the last 10 years to learn from her and be inspired by her, and learn more about how in tourism we can do things differently that help each other, that help our country, that help our planet, that help iwi. So introducing Anna takes a while, you guys. So sit back, because I'm going to read really quickly. Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to read really quickly Anna's bio. So Anna Pollock is the founder of Conscious Travel. She has 45 years experience in tourism as an independent consultant, strategist, international speaker, and change agent. And that's what she really is. Past clients include the Canadian Tourism Commission, PATA, European Travel Commission, Tourism British Columbia. Told you guys this is going to be a while. The Australian Tourism Export Council, Tourism Tasmania, Innovation Norway, Visit Flanders. I can go on and on, you guys. Anna has undertaken seminal work in many aspects of tourism, notably in education, sustainability, and technology. During the 1990s, she established herself as a thought leader on the strategic implications of the internet, created the first internet-based tourism strategy for Scotland, and co-developed one of the first multi-purpose destination management systems. Anna's strength is her ability to see the whole picture. She asks difficult questions and helps others make sense of the rapidly and dramatically changing world. Watched and respected by academics and tourism leaders across the world. You guys, we already have Peru and other countries watching right now, so that's proof. Her bold approach and thinking under the brand of consciousness travel, she's proposed that the tourism sector both rises and challenges its game for at least 10 years, and began investigating and studying regenerative development in 2015. Instead of writing a book, she's now creating a new website, Regenerative Tourism. The source designed is the now writing a book on the application so that we could put the thinking into practice. She's been working with Visit Flanders for the last 2 years, supporting their Travel to Tomorrow program and helping them shift their goal from volume growth to destination flourishing. She's now serving as part of the core tourism futures task force here in New Zealand, and to reimagine the future of tourism. And now I get to hand over to Anna Pollock to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. I now just need to share my screen, right? So just give me a second. And I've learned a valuable lesson: never send your resume you used to try and get work to someone before an event like this. There we go, share. Now, can you see that? Can you see my screen? Okay, good.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. We're in business. Well, kia koutou, everyone. It is fantastic almost to be in New Zealand. My heart has been in New Zealand ever since I came earlier this year at Kristen Dunn's kind invitation to support the launch of the Bay of Plenty strategy. And I'm most grateful for that, and the chance also to come and speak with Impact Hub Waikato, again, due to another personal relationship with Nanise Ginnan, whom I did meet in Samoa and had several years opportunity to work with. So finally, we'll get underway right now. This is what I'm going to be talking about today, trying to introduce this wonderful, complex, powerful topic called regeneration to tourism. It's a tall order, and I just need to shift slides. As I mentioned, I was here back in March and did some presentations before lockdown happened. And this was one that we did in the Bay of Plenty in March. And it was pretty thorough. I didn't see any need to repeat it because obviously COVID has changed our world in the meantime. But it is available for those of you who would like to follow the reasoning as to why we need to change. This is before COVID made its point very clearly that we could not take normal for granted. So there's a link there to the slideshow where you can see it. And obviously the whole world has turned upside down since then, and an awful lot has happened. Gina, thank you to you. You very kindly did an interview with myself and my business partner, Michelle Holliday, author of a book called The Age of Thrivability. And that's also available there. The link is there, so you'll be able to look at that if, for more information. So this time last year, we would be talking about over-tourism. What difference a few months makes, really. It's not even a complete year. Now we're talking about under-tourism. And we've experienced almost a wipeout of all of the growth that took place in international tourism between 2000 and 2020, which is something nobody but predicted. So the question I'm asking is, what have we, excuse me, I'm having trouble with my screen is not showing me what it should. The question I'm asking is, what has this microbe taught us? What do we need to learn from this COVID-19? And I would suggest that the answer lies in how we see the world, how we frame the world, how we understand our relationship with the world and with each other. For some, COVID was a sort of inconvenient, but a welcome pause. We all got time to spend outdoors, spend time with our family. The air was clear, the water was clear. We could see the sky with stars at night. It seemed quite pleasant at first. For others, it was seen immediately as an enemy. We had to go to war against this virus. It was a pathogen. We had to defeat it. And for others of us, we saw it as potentially a messenger. But the way you chose to see COVID is an indication of perhaps your framing, your way you understand how the world works. So what has it taught us? Well, first of all, that uncertainty, unpredictability are the new normal. In fact, you could argue that is a fact of life. We've never really been able to predict the future. There have always been enormous surprises. And our science now even suggests that we are in a period of irreducible uncertainty. The more connected we become, the more change can happen. The future can't be predicted, no matter what you might think. It can only be envisioned, dreamed, imagined, and then brought lovingly into being. These words I'm quoting from here are from one of the greatest systems thinkers of our time, Donella Meadows, who wrote, that was part of the Limits to Growth publication, which really was a major impetus to the environmental movement in the 1970s. So she says you can't control a system. They can only be redesigned or designed. We can't surge forward with certainty into a world of no surprises. All we're going to get is surprises, so we need to learn from them. You can't impose your will on it, but you can listen to what the system is telling us. We can begin to realize, working together with the system, understanding how it works, we can bring forth something much better than we could have done by ourselves. So that's really the sort of setting for what we're in right now. The other thing that COVID-19 did was really show just how vulnerable we are. No one predicted the kind of losses, the kind of cessation of business that occurred in that period back in March and April. But it also showed just how interdependent we are. At the beginning, we probably thought, oh, it's just something happening in a market in a town I didn't even know existed in China, and therefore didn't matter. But within a very short period of time, we realized just how much it did matter. So it's highlighted that, it's highlighted the illusion that we can have put things in nice, neatly packaged boxes, separate issues, work in silos. That is just not a way of being anymore. And finally, you really do, COVID taught us, and we're experiencing this in our second surge right now in the UK, that nobody can be healthy in an unhealthy environment. No business can be healthy if the economy is fundamentally unhealthy. And this is something that we really have to take into our consciousness. For those of us who've been involved in sustainability, for example, a major part of our presentations and thinking is that there are limits to nature's ability to handle the output of our production consumption system. We talk about its carrying capacity. The reality is few people understood what we were talking about. But when COVID came, and I think your Prime Minister actually really was one of the first great communicators to get across to people that it wasn't just the number of people who were infected by COVID, the problem was going to occur if our hospitals were going to be overrun with patients. People could understand that a hospital only had so many beds, and we had to try and manage this infection so that we didn't overload it. So we talked about flattening the curve. Well, that is carrying capacity. And so COVID really brought that home to us. The other fact of life is that other existential challenges, namely climate change, biodiversity collapse, wealth disparity, they're not going away. And they still persist, and we can't take our eye off the ball. The fifth point, and there are 6 really facts I'm talking about here, is the truth is we are not helpless or innocent victims. And in fact, we now know that it's human behavior. It's the if you like, it's the effect of our 70, 150 years of industrial production system at work that is the cause of COVID. We have deforested so much of the earth, and various species are now coming into contact with one another that wouldn't normally. Viruses that, sort of behave, if you like, are now able to jump from one species to another. And that was essentially how COVID came to be. So that's our behavior. And I just want to take you through this idea that our behavior was a reflection of what we thought our purpose and our role was as human beings. And that was that we could go out there and cut as many trees down as we wished. We could farm land until it was tired. We could fish the fish out of the sea, and they'll always be able to come back. That obviously wasn't true. And that, in effect, also changed our values. What what was right, what was wrong, what was our role, and so on. But underneath all that was a fundamental set of beliefs or assumptions that framed how we looked at the world. And it was that that essentially enabled COVID to happen. So the sixth point is that here we are. In New Zealand's case, you've done a remarkable job of surviving. You're now in a period of recovery. It's not quite as bad as we feared back in April. But the next challenge is, how do we try and move forward with more resilience, perhaps, than we have certainly had before this year? And better still, how do we start to rebuild a new economy in which we thrive? And the only way you can do that is, as Donella Meadows said, if we listen and learn to the natural world of which we're a part, and start to work in partnership with that to redesign a way of living that results in harmony and not so many of these real challenges that we've just had to face now. So today I'm going to talk about regeneration, try and give you an introduction. It is a complex subject, so bear with me. I'm trying to make it as simple and as accessible as possible, but it's worth it because it's probably the most exciting and potent way of looking at the world and way of being in the world that might get us through the next several decades. But I'm going to start because so many people are using the word. It's one of those words that's sort of catching on. I think it's because people want to believe there's something new out there that we can hold on to. But it's so I'll talk a little bit about what it's not. It's not sustainability on steroids. It's not about making incremental improvements. It is to a certain extent about doing more good. Let's say what sustainability was about was doing less harm. So reducing your consumption of scarce resources, minimizing the emissions that you put into the atmosphere. That was doing less harm. So then the obvious thing came after that, and to a certain extent, that's what Impact Hub is about, which is how can we start doing more good? How can we have a positive impact on our world? But it's more than that. That's not enough. That doesn't challenge the system itself. It's perfectly possible to have the current system doing less harm, doing a bit of good, but not changing anything fundamentally. And if we continue to avoid that level of systems change, we'll continue to produce another different set of challenges in the future. So it's so much more than a trendy buzzword. It isn't even a thing or a noun. I mean, the one thing we do in tourism is we take the word tourism, put an adjective in front of it, and all of a sudden we have a noun. So we have cultural tourism, we have wild adventure tourism, we have heritage tourism, you name it. They become nouns and they get in a box and people huddle together in their box. And the next thing you know, you've got another silo. But what it is, in fact, it's a verb. The dictionary definition of the verb to regenerate is to give new life or energy, to revitalize, to realize potential. And fundamentally, it's about creating the fertile conditions for life to thrive going forward. To me, that's very exciting. It's energetic. Lynn Margulis, another heroine of mine and a biologist, said that, and I can't read my own quote here, just because your lovely faces are all down the right side of my screen. She said, life on Earth is much more like a verb. It repairs and makes itself, where am I looking at here? I'm trying to find it now. It repairs, maintains, recreates, and outdoes itself. I mean, I love that thought. That's what the closest definition to life that the scientific community has come up with. And I was listening to Nahiwi on the task force the other day, and he introduced this concept of Maori, or Maori, I think I've pronounced it correctly, which is the understanding in the Maori community of life force. And if you really want a simple definition of regeneration, it is the life force at work. It's Maori at work. So my business partner, Michelle Holliday, says basically it's also an informed intent and practice. So informed in the sense that you're going to have to learn new stuff. I can't avoid it. You're going to have to understand how nature works. So you need to be informed if you're going to form a partnership with nature. It's an intention and it's a practice. Kind of like if you do yoga practice, or you have a spiritual practice, or you're into sports and you have a certain sports regime. It's personal to you. The way it's expressed suits you, your circumstances, your intentions, and so on, but it adheres to certain principles. That's why it's so difficult to define. There are no checklists associated with regeneration, no how-tos. It's something you have to participate in and learn. But most importantly, it's based on a new way of thinking and seeing. Einstein said, we cannot solve the problems we have on Earth right now if we use the same way of thinking, seeing, understanding that created the problem in the first place. And this is the biggest challenge I'm facing right now, because most of us are not aware of what our invisible assumptions and beliefs are that constrain how we see the world. We're constantly filtering things out because we have certain beliefs that we've internalized as to what's possible. So regeneration, therefore, is a journey. And I'm trying to find, and I hope you'll understand, relatively straightforward ways of explaining all of this stuff. But if you imagine, we've got business as usual down here on the left-hand corner. We've been driven up to the top of this, thinking maybe that path ahead is going up a mountain, when we're going to find out at the end of it, it's the end of a cliff. And what we see in the distance is what I call business as it could be. So BAU is the acronym people use for business as usual. I'm introducing another one. And what we see in this image is that in order for us to get to that far side, we're probably going to have to go back down the hill, down into that foggy valley, across all the rivers and streams that are in it to get to the other side. But I can't make it any less complex than that. And for every journey, we need a map. And this is a map based on the work of Bill Reed, one of the progenitors of not creators, but early promoters of a regenerative way of thinking. And if you'll bear with me, I'll take you through this very quickly. On the left axis, we have this notion of energy, with the green arrow going up, meaning more energy, more life, vitality, thriving, and so on. And then the red arrow going down, where a situation is draining us, it's bogging us down, it's extracting energy, and ultimately it leads, unfortunately, to death. So we're right on the cusp right now in terms of which direction we want to go as humanity. The horizontal line is, again, life doesn't work this neatly, but it's a trajectory of how we have progressed as human beings over the last, I would say, 70 to 100 years. Maybe longer. Prior to that, industry has been going on earlier than that, but its awareness of the need to change has really occurred starting in the 50s, I would suggest. So we have business that's operating under all of the conventional principles, business as usual, and then we got to a point realizing that we had to somehow clean up our act, I suppose. And we saw the birth of the green movement, of sustainability, of doing less harm. And as Paul was saying, he used the word restoration, now realizing that we have within our power to actually repair some of the damage that we have been doing. So that's restoration. But we're still all in this mindset, if you like. It's to the left of this big column down the middle. What that column is my rather simplistic attempt, because I'm not very good at these graphics, to show the enormous chasm that exists in our thinking between that which produced something which was essentially extractive and degenerative, to where we want to go to a new way of being on the planet, which is essentially generative. And there's a reason for the word re, because some of this knowledge that we're going to be using has been around for a long time. It's been protected by the indigenous peoples in many cases, but we're going to have to remember that, put that back together into our lives if we're going forward. So I hope this is making sense and helping you understand where we're at. So regeneration is an expression of this enormous paradigm shift. And I like this particular map because it shows that all of us have got a role to play. We're in the middle, we're right here, if you like, you'll follow me, where we've got creators of new systems. Many of them are kind of like the clients, excuse me, I mustn't be so trigger happy here. The clients of Impact Hub, who are creating new ideas, new business forms, new ventures that are creating good. We have people in the current system who are basically as important, because we can't suddenly go from one to the other just like that. Somebody has to keep the lights on, if you like, keep the system running enough that we can allow the new system to take hold. And then there are a lot of us acting as bridge builders in between. So I show that slide because every single one of you in this session has a role to play, and you know where you want to fit. So again, what makes it so very different? Well, if sustainability is doing less harm, then regeneration is about developing the capability, the innate capability of a system to organize itself, to thrive and evolve. Now, if you think about yourself, you were a child, you matured into an adult, and the process of maturation was learning how to take care of your life and create the conditions for other people around you and other life forms around you to also thrive and evolve. So that's what regeneration is about. We're doing it all the time. The beautiful thing about these concepts is that they apply to the individual, they apply to the business, and they can be applied to the community. Nature is very efficient. She has a few fundamental principles that can be reproduced over and over again in different ways. It isn't as if we have to learn so many new things. We have to understand the fundamental dynamics. So again, to reiterate, what makes it so different is that you have to have a different way of understanding the world. And I'll come to that in a minute. Once you change your mindset about how the world really works, that alters what you consider to be important. And that will change what you consider important enough to make your purpose in life, your role in life. And that changes our behavior. So I hope I'm taking my time to do this, because unless we can grapple with these fundamentals, it's too easy to rush to what I call the outer aspect of regeneration. So let's just keep on with regeneration involves changing way of seeing. And I'll make that as simple as possible. Our current industrial production and consumption system is based on the notion that everything is a machine. You can blame Newton for it. It was the clockwork universe. Everything could be predicted. It's linear. It's manipulable. We can take pieces apart and fix them and put them back together. We looked at the human body as a machine. Most of our medical systems were initially based on it being a machine. We look at our brains as computers, and so on and so on. The reality is the universe is not a dead machine that you can tear apart and put back together. It's a living system. So the example of the living system on the right side of your screen, the plant there, if I tried to take it apart in order to understand it, well, I would kill it, okay? With a machine, I can take it apart and put it back and there's no difference. That's really a fundamental difference. We're talking about life and living. So what we're trying to do with this in tourism is say, let's now reframe, let's understand the whole ball of wax, if you like, not as some kind of a machine or conveyor belt, because if you look at many destinations, we treat it as such. A visitor comes in one end, They move along a system where various suppliers provide transportation, accommodation, attraction, events, food, etc., etc. We extract value from the customer and they leave at the other end and go home with the memory, game over. All of the parts are acting independently of one another. That is a machine-like way of seeing things, when in actual fact, we know it isn't that way at all. We know it's a living system. It's a group of people all working together, but it's nowhere near as cut and dried as perhaps we've assumed in the past. It's really a community. It's a community of self-organizing agents like you and me, who make choices every single day to either collaborate or compete or whatever it might be. But we haven't really acknowledged that. We keep talking about the industry as if it's vertically integrated. We can put things in boxes and so on. And so here's another map. Now, you could argue this is because we're right now trying to map the tourism system in New Zealand for the task force. You could argue that's a map of a destination. And maybe the brown circles are hotels and the green circles are restaurants, and there are transport nodes and entertainment and all the rest of it. And the lines are their connections. Now, unfortunately, we can't have a dialogue in the webinar like this, but it's not that. It's a map of a 39-meter square portion of a forest. And these are the species of trees and plants and shrubs in that 9-meter square block. And every one of those shrubs, plants, trees, mushrooms are all communicating with one another. And we can now actually measure the flow of information and nutrients and so on. And it's incredibly dynamic. We now know that plants do, in fact, warn each other if pests are around. We now know they share. We know that big mother trees look after baby trees, et cetera, et cetera. All this is new science. And my question is, how can we start to look at a destination, say Rotorua, for example, or Hamilton? How can we begin to see what it really is, which is this amazing community? So if we're now starting to shift away from seeing it as a machine, life as a machine, to seeing life as life and living as nature and how nature works, then you have to ask yourself, well, what is the purpose of life? I know this sounds awfully philosophical, but when you look at, let's say, an oak tree, for example, what is the purpose of an oak tree? Well, the acorn has within it everything it needs in order to go from that little acorn seed in the top left-hand side of the picture there to that magnificent tree below it. And it has its own unique essence. Every single one of those acorns is going to produce a very individual tree. No tree is alike. Everything is unique. It has its potential. Now it's going to have to face various forces as to whether its potential is fully realized, but it's now going to go to a seedling, and it will eventually become this amazing tree, which becomes a habitat, an ecosystem for all kinds of other life. The purpose of that acorn is not just to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That tree eventually goes up to a certain size, and then it becomes more complex. It has more habitats within it. This is what we're being asked to do as human beings. This is what we're being asked of our economies, is to stop thinking about the need to just get bigger and bigger, but to become more complex and create the conditions for other life to thrive. So if we want to figure out what's successful, we may as well look at nature. And again, I'm going through this really quickly to tell a story. I'm not expecting you to go into the detail right now, but we know that nature works, it flourishes, it's self-organizing. It doesn't have any waste, for example. Every single part of it is unique. There's no standards, all right? These are features of nature that we can start to apply. At the same time as our understanding of how nature works, we're also understanding that humans can be so much more than we ever thought we could be. We're asking, how do we unleash the untapped potential within ourselves to become more than what we thought we could be? And so the question now in tourism is, how do we create and sustain a visitor economy that tangibly enables everyone in that system, whether they're a resident, an individual, a business, and a community, to thrive, to flourish, and to be healthy in every way. And this is what regeneration is about. And this is why it's so exciting to me. So instead of saying, how do we just get bigger? How do we start to help individuals, companies, and places flourish? Flourishing is a beautiful term because it's very organic, obviously. The other wonderful thing about flourishing is that when those of you who are parents, you have let's say an adolescent son, when they're on form, when they're full of vitality and energy and everything's going well, and immediately when he's not, right? You sense it. You don't have to go and take his temperature. You don't have to question him. You know whether or not he's flourishing. And that's the beauty of this way of thinking. We start to rely on aspects of our ways of knowing that perhaps we've let go rusty because we've told if you can't measure it, it doesn't matter, it doesn't count. So this way of thinking actually affects our role. What is our role? Is it just to extract? Is it just to look after number one? Or is it in fact to take care? So in nature, everything contributes to the health and well-being of the whole. Our role now is going to be to become stewards. And as Paul was indicating, the business world is changing very rapidly. For most of my career, I was told over and over and over again that the purpose of business is to make a profit. Now, that was Milton Friedman. For year after year, that's all the business should do. Now, Paul Polman is saying, if you want to be really successful, and he's not alone, I'm pleased to say, you will need to make a contribution. Governments are responding, and the beautiful thing and the opportunity you have is that your government has responded earlier than some others. There's people like Jacinda are saying, what's the point of just growing visitor numbers and GDP and spending if the people involved are not thriving themselves? And therefore you have this living systems framework that's built into the Treasury now. And as I say, on the task force, the first thing that we have to do is everything we're looking at is how does it contribute to the natural capital in New Zealand, to the social cultural capital, the human capital, and the financial capital. So regeneration means asking different questions. I'm sorry, I've lost track of my time, so please let me know if I'm going over my time. I expected there to be something up there for me. My computer has masked the time. But regeneration means asking a lot of different questions, not what can you, the country, do for my industry, but what can tourism do to contribute to the health and well-being of its country and its citizens? How can we build a tourism that delivers demonstrable benefit? So this is an implication, if you like. And we're not alone in New Zealand. I'm literally 5 miles away from Wales. Iceland is another country that's asking these fundamental questions of what are we here for? In Wales, they have a new minister for future generations. So every single policy, every single major decision in Wales has to be looked at through the lens of what impact is this going to have in subsequent generations, very much similar to the sort of 7th-generation philosophy of many Indigenous people. So instead of just growing, how do we grow net benefit? How do we develop those 4 capitals that you've seen? How do we make sure that the benefits that we generate from tourism stay in the community, trickle down and benefit as many local businesses as possible? The challenge is in tourism, in many cases, we have no idea where the money goes. And how do we balance this need to thrive locally while staying within planetary boundaries? This is the work of Kate Raworth. So we're shifting from extracting wealth now to generating wealth. And I just got to about 4 more slides to go through. We hear the word trade-off, and I'm often asked, well, how can you do this regenerative stuff and make a profit? As if one precluded the other. And that's why I really want to emphasize regeneration is not about less, it's about more, but more of the things that really matter. More health, more vitality, more diversity, equity, opportunity, more inclusivity, more productivity. Growth is not just size, but it's more growth as in more complexity, more abundance. This is what the kind of results that we want to create. And then finally, well, getting close to the end, where is the value in tourism actually created? This is something that's fascinated me for a long time. And I would argue that everything comes down to a number of encounters that occur between a host on the one hand and a guest on the other hand. They meet. Now, it could be as simple as getting into a cab and the driver takes you to your hotel, walking into the lobby and meeting the guy behind the desk. You're having a meeting, an encounter, and that ends up being an exchange. And it results as a guest in a memory. It can have, obviously can have a material value to both parties, but it has so much more than that. And what we really should be focusing on is how do we enrich and enliven and almost enchant the guest with that encounter, because that is where the value really lies. And to do that, we have to start thinking holistically about, okay, what's happening in that encounter? Are we engaging all aspects of what it means to be a human? Are we engaging our feelings, our bodies, our spiritual aspects of ourselves, that need for meaning, purpose, wonder, awe, connection, as well as the intellectual, mental aspects of ourselves? And this is going to be really important because we're automating virtually everything else, but no algorithm can, in fact, handle any of these aspects of being human. So what kind of skills do we need to have that will enable that encounter to be magical? And then finally, to try, because I'm obviously covering a huge amount of territory, how and where do we start? And frankly, we start right here at home in a community. The fundamental notion behind regeneration is that it is place-based, it's influenced by its context, it's about people coming together in community to develop that capability to welcome people, to manage tourism, to dream the future they want for their city. And so the task really is to develop the knowledge, skills, and tools that enable people to do just that. This is not about telling people we've got a great campaign and making sure that they like it. This is about sitting around and listening far more than perhaps we professionals in tourism have been encouraged to do. It involves asking a lot more questions and a lot more listening. So, and I'm pleased to say Kristen is on the panel because this is exactly what Kristen has been doing in the Bay of Plenty and why it's so exciting. Taking the time to sit people down in their communities and say, who are we? What do we care about? What do we wish for our future? Because all of the power to change is going to take place in community when people come and have these kind of conversations. So I could talk for much length. We've got the whole regenerative model. We've got various pathways that you can take into it. I hope I've given you enough of an overview and a map that you've got a better sense of what regeneration was before I began. I'm just taking a little plug. We're just trying right now, we're developing, Michelle and I, a program for communities called Back to Life. And I'm also developing this website. I gave up the idea of a book because no one reads a book from cover beginning to end anymore. So I'm creating this website, which is the place that everything you want to know about regenerative tourism, but we're afraid to ask. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm very, very excited to be working with New Zealand because I think actually you have the potential right now to step forward and be leaders. You have these two phenomenal cultures sitting side by side and getting closer and closer together the ancient earth wisdom from the Maori, the ingenuity and the scientific expertise from other parts of your population, your location, your intimate relationship with nature, Aotearoa could bring us all back to life. So thank you very much for your time. And I do, as I say, I got lost in terms of time, and Paul was far too polite to jump up and down and wave a red flag. So I hope that was a rapid introduction, was a place to start, and I'll let you, Gina, ask me some tough questions.
Wow. Thank you,
I go too fast.
That was fantastic. There's just so much to think about. And like every time I hear you speak, there's more, and I take pages and pages of notes. I don't know what everybody else thinks, but for me, that visual of how the forest works and communicates and takes care of each other, and your comment that there's no waste and that they take care of each other was just, maybe because of a marketer, I'm very visual. That was just a beautiful example or vision for me to better understand what regenerative tourism is all about. Because I know that you've said it's a term that's getting tossed around a lot, and you feel like you're almost, because you've talked a lot about stewardship. And what you've said today, you've talked. You feel almost like you're a little bit of a in charge of stewardship of the word regenerative tourism and what it means. Is that true?
To a certain extent. I mean, yeah, those people that really started investing heavily and thinking all of this through, they're scientists in biologists, ecologists. Have had a lot of influence. A lot of scientists, quantum physicists, for example, are trying to get across that the world doesn't behave the way we were probably taught. Well, bearing in mind I'm so old, but when I was taught, it was Newtonian physics, and if you studied biology, you just had to remember the Latin names of lots of plants, and you didn't understand any of the dynamics. All this understanding about how nature is working really is new. It's fundamentally new. So, yeah.
And I'm just going to ask you one more question, because we've got so many questions that we want to ask the panel and for you to also. But one thing that you said is that, and correct me if I got this wrong, is that there was the start of the paradigm shift in about the 50s when it went from corporate everything being about the taking care of the stakeholders. There started to be a little bit change, and only recently are we starting to get more corporate leaders talking about that it needs to be about contribution. So my question is that is in your opinion, what kind of timeline do we see this becoming? I know you can't predict, because that's one of the first things that you said, is that there is no predictability into the future. But what kind of timeline do you envision for Aotearoa to start making some of these mind changes and shifts for regenerative tourism?
When I look back at what's happened over the last several months, I would say that it can happen a lot faster than we think. Okay. But it does depend on the we need movements from the bottom. So we need organizations like Impact Hub and the Bay of Plenty to be out there trying these new ideas out. We also need, and this is what I'm working on right now, is for the national government to say, yes, we are going to start to support that activity. There's an awful lot of experimentation going on. But we're going to, we want to encourage that. We don't want to be stuck in these old mindsets. It's a very difficult question to answer. The irony is, generally speaking, it would take probably at least a decade to get a paradigm shift of this nature going, and that would be historically unprecedented. Okay. But I've just seen some work from the Barrett Values Center, who measure, look at how values shift, and they've got some really interesting insights from what people valued pre-COVID, during, and post-COVID. And they say that the values have shifted in what would normally take 5 to 7 years has happened in 6 months in terms of movement of values. So the other side of this question, unfortunately, is from an environmental point of view right now, we don't have much time. The facts are unless we change the trajectory in terms of degradation of the biosphere and pollution of the air with too much carbon, it needs to be brought down and put in the ground where it belongs. Unless we change those trajectories in the next 10 years, then we may not have too many choices left. So there's a real sense of urgency. To me, if I sound passionate, it's because I know that we don't have a lot of time.
Beautiful. I was hoping that was going to be your answer. So that's fantastic that there's a little bit of a silver lining to COVID, that we have had those value shifts quickly. So amazing.
Yeah, I'll share that data with trying to write an article so that people can see. It's very encouraging. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well,